21. Gospel Legends. Who vanished from the spotlight? After one iconic hit, what if I told you that some of gospel's most powerful voices, the ones who gave us songs that shook churches to their core, vanished almost overnight? From anthems that sold hundreds of thousands of copies to performances that brought entire congregations to tears. These legends carved their names into history with just one unforgettable hit, and then disappeared from the spotlight. Why did they walk away? Or were they pushed aside by an industry chasing trends? Stay with us as we uncover the untold stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence right now. Lucy Campbell. Lucy Campbell stands as one of the earliest architects of gospel music, a trailblazer who carved out space for black women in a field that was at the time dominated by men and often dismissive of women's creative authority. Born in 1885 in Mississippi and raised in Memphis, Campbell grew up in an era when Jim Crow laws shaped every aspect of African American life. Yet instead of being silenced by systemic barriers, she responded by lifting her voice and pen, channeling her faith into words that resonated far beyond her own community. Her most enduring composition, Something Within, published in 1907, articulated a deeply spiritual conviction that true belief is not just an outward performance, but an inward transformation. The song spread rapidly through hymnals and choirs, becoming a fixture in worship services across the United States. What makes Campbell remarkable is that she wasn't interested in chasing celebrity or profit. Unlike performers who later pursued record deals, she was content to see her work sung in congregations where it could minister to ordinary people. She directed choirs, trained young musicians, and even helped establish the music department of the National Baptist Convention, which shaped the repertoire of thousands of churches nationwide. In this way, she influenced future stars like Thomas A. Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson, even if her own name remained largely hidden in the shadows. She wrote more than 100 songs during her lifetime, many of them published in black hymnals when mainstream publishers refused to print gospel works. Campbell also used music as a tool for education, integrating it into literacy programs and civil rights gatherings. Her leadership style emphasized service rather than spotlight, humility rather than fame. Do you think today's music industry, with its obsession over charts and streams, would have allowed someone like Lucy Campbell to thrive without compromise? Although she never enjoyed mainstream stardom, her legacy is undeniable. Lucy Campbell's hymns still echo in sanctuaries more than a century later, reminding us that sometimes the greatest influence belongs not to those on the stage, but to those who quietly give others their song. Willie Mae Ford Smith. Willie Mae Ford Smith was not just a gospel singer. She was a spiritual force who reshaped how the music was felt and delivered. Born in 1904 in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, and later settling in St. Louis, she rose during the 1930s and 1940s, a period when gospel was shifting from rural roots into a recognized national sound. Unlike many of her peers, Smith deliberately resisted the commercial spotlight. She never signed big record deals, never sought radio fame, and rarely toured outside the church circuit. Instead, she poured her gift into revivals, conventions, and local congregations where her voice could bring entire audiences to tears. Her most celebrated number, Peace in the Valley, showcased her ability to merge deep conviction with breathtaking vocal control. Smith's philosophy was radical for her time. She viewed gospel as sacred testimony, not entertainment. For her, singing was prayer, not performance. While contemporaries like Mahalia Jackson pursued recording careers, Smith chose mentorship and ministry. She taught countless younger singers how to connect emotionally with Scripture through song, laying the foundation for a style that blended preaching with melody. Many remember her ability to stretch a single line into a spiritual crescendo that left congregations weeping and shouting. Have you ever heard a song so powerful in church that it felt less like music and more like a direct message from heaven? That was Willie Mae Ford Smith's gift. Her career longevity was remarkable. For decades, she remained a respected figure in National Baptist Convention's training choirs, and demonstrating that gospel could move people without theatrics or commercial polish. By refusing nightclub invitations and popular recording offers, she ensured her music stayed in the sanctuary untainted by secular expectations. Though she never achieved household recognition outside religious circles among gospel insiders, she was revered as a matriarch of spiritual song. When she passed in 1994, she left behind a legacy not of chart-topping hits, but of lives touched. Willie Mae Ford Smith proved that fame is fleeting, but ministry is eternal. Her voice lives on in memories, in hymns still sung, and in the generations of gospel singers she inspired. Brother Joe May. Brother Joe May, often called the Thunderbolt of the Midwest, was a gospel singer whose voice carried the weight of both heaven and earth. Born in 1912 in Macon, Mississippi, he grew up immersed in church life where his natural talent quickly set him apart. By the late 1940s, he signed with Specialty Records, a label that helped bring gospel to broader audiences. His breakout hit, Search Me Lord, 1949, was so electrifying that even people outside the church world took notice. With a booming tenor that could rattle rafters, he earned his nickname because when he sang, it felt like a storm had entered the room. What made May unique was his delivery. He didn't just sing notes, he unleashed them with a raw intensity that blurred the line between sermon and song. His recordings became staples of gospel radio, and he toured extensively through the 1950s, often performing before packed congregations. For many black families during that era, Search Me Lord became an anthem of perseverance and faith during times of racial hardship and social change. His energy made him unforgettable, yet paradoxically, it also confined him to the gospel circuit as he refused to soften his style for commercial crossover. Would you respect an artist more for staying true to their message, even if it meant sacrificing fame? Despite his enormous talent, Brother Joe May never achieved the mainstream celebrity status of Mahalia Jackson or Clara Ward. Part of the reason was his own conviction. He rejected offers to commercialize his music, fearing it would dilute the sacredness of gospel. Another factor was health. As the years went on, his demanding singing style and ongoing health issues weakened him. By the late 1950s, newer artists with fresher sounds began to eclipse his presence, though his loyal fan base never stopped admiring him. Brother Joe May died in 1972, but his legend endures. He remains a symbol of uncompromising authenticity in gospel music, a man who sang not for the spotlight, but for the Spirit. His thunderous voice continues to echo through recordings, a reminder of gospel's power to shake the soul. Inez Andrews. Inez Andrews, born in 1929 in Birmingham, Alabama, rose to prominence as the unmistakable contralto voice of gospel's golden age. She first caught national attention as a member of the Caravans, the powerhouse female ensemble that also featured Shirley Caesar and Albertina Walker. Even in a group filled with legends, Andrews' deep, resonant tone set her apart. When she stepped forward to sing, her voice carried not just sound, but testimony, a blend of raw power and storytelling that could quiet a noisy hall or lift a congregation into shouts of praise. Her defining hit, Lord, Don't Move That Mountain, 1973, became an anthem of endurance, urging believers to ask for strength to climb over obstacles instead of praying for them to disappear. The song's message resonated deeply in an era when many black families faced social and economic struggles. It quickly spread across radio stations, revivals, and Sunday morning choirs. Andrews performed it with such conviction that audiences often wept, convinced they were hearing not just lyrics, but lived truth. Have you ever had a song speak so directly to your struggles that it felt written just for you? That was the impact of Inez Andrews' mountain-moving testimony. Though Lord, Don't Move That Mountain cemented her place in gospel history, Andrews never pursued commercial stardom. She remained dedicated to her faith, performing primarily in churches and on gospel programs. As the 1980s and 1990s ushered in more contemporary, upbeat gospel sounds, her traditional style was less visible to younger audiences. Yet, she refused to compromise, choosing authenticity over trendiness. Her career spanned more than 5 decades, during which she recorded multiple albums, led choirs, and toured internationally. In 2013, just before her passing, she was honored with the Stellar Awards Hall of Fame recognition, a testament to her lasting influence. Inez Andrews may have faded from mainstream attention, but her voice continues to echo wherever choirs lift "Lord, Don't Move That Mountain." She remains a giant of gospel proof that one song delivered with truth and conviction can inspire generations long after the spotlight dims. Reverend F.C. Barnes. Reverend Faircloth F.C. Barnes was a North Carolina pastor whose name became forever tied to one unforgettable gospel anthem. Born in 1929 in Rocky Mount, he spent most of his life preaching and pastoring small congregations before unexpectedly breaking into national attention with the 1983 release of Rough Side of the Mountain. Performed as a duet with school teacher-turned-singer Janice Brown, the song was an instant phenomenon. It sold over 500,000 copies, a rare achievement for a gospel record at the time, and became a staple on gospel radio at funerals, family reunions, and revivals throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Its message was simple yet profound. Life is full of trials, but faith gives us the strength to climb. What made the song powerful was not slick production or flashy marketing, but authenticity. Reverend Barnes's preacher's tone blended with Brown's gentle voice, embodying the struggles and triumphs of ordinary believers. The track even went gold, placing him in the same conversation as Mahalia Jackson or James Cleveland in terms of reach, though he never sought celebrity. Would you in his place have chased more fame or stayed grounded in ministry as he did? After the success of Rough Side of the Mountain, Barnes received offers to tour widely, but he declined. For him, preaching was his first calling, music second. He continued pastoring his Redbud Holy Church and occasionally recorded other albums, but none matched the cultural impact of his signature duet. Rather than disappointment, Barnes saw this as divine purpose. His music was meant to minister, not entertain. Until his passing in 2011, Reverend Barnes remained a beloved community figure, respected both as a pastor and as the voice behind one of gospel's most enduring songs. Though his time in the national spotlight was brief, the legacy of Rough Side of the Mountain ensures that his voice, steady, faithful, and full of conviction, will never be forgotten. Janice Brown. Janice Brown's story in gospel music is a rare reminder that sometimes greatness finds people who never sought it. Born in 1954 in North Carolina, she was not a professional recording artist by trade, but a humble school teacher who loved singing in church. Her path to recognition began when she was introduced to Reverend F.C. Barnes, and together they recorded Rough Side of the Mountain in 1983. The duet, blending Barnes' preacher-like baritone with Brown's soaring yet tender soprano, became one of the most beloved gospel songs of its era, selling over 500,000 copies and resonating deeply with congregations across America. What set Brown apart was the purity of her approach. She was not chasing a stage, a spotlight, or a record deal. She simply wanted to share her faith through song. The authenticity in her voice made people believe every word she sang. When she delivered the line about climbing life's rough mountains, it didn't sound like performance. It sounded like testimony. That honesty is part of why Rough Side of the Mountain became more than music. It became a soundtrack of endurance for countless families. Have you ever heard a song so genuine that it felt less like entertainment and more like a prayer whispered directly to you? That was Janice Brown's gift. Despite the enormous success of the duet, Brown never turned her life toward full-time music. She recorded several more projects with Reverend Barnes and did limited touring, but she remained primarily devoted to teaching and serving in her local church. In an industry where success often pulls artists away from their roots, Brown chose stability, community, and faith over chasing stardom. Janice Brown passed away in 2008, but her legacy continues every time Rough Side of the Mountain is sung in a sanctuary. Though her time in the spotlight was brief, she stands as a testament to the power of sincerity. Her voice, unpolished by commercial ambition, still rings with clarity, a reminder that sometimes the most lasting impact comes not from those who seek fame, but from those who sing only to honor God. Elder Goldwire McClendon. Elder Goldwire McClendon is living proof that passion and calling know no age limit. Born in 1928 in Jacksonville, Florida, he spent most of his life singing in church choirs and helping form groups like the Cosmopolitan Gospel Singers. For decades, his powerful tenor remained largely confined to local congregations in Philadelphia, where he served faithfully as a minister and worship leader. Then in 2009, at the remarkable age of 79, McClendon stunned the gospel world by auditioning for BET's gospel competition show, Sunday Best Season 3. His performances, rich with soul and conviction, left audiences speechless. Though he ultimately placed second, his voice and testimony reached millions. What made McClendon so unforgettable was not just technical ability, but the way every note seemed drenched in experience. His rendition of classic hymns carried the weight of a lifetime of faith and struggle. Viewers marveled that the man nearly 80 could sing with such strength and move with such energy. Have you ever seen someone pursue their dreams so late in life that it made you rethink what's possible for yourself? Elder McClendon embodied that moment of inspiration. Following the show, he released the album, The Best of Elder Goldwire McClendon, and for a brief season, he traveled to churches and conventions, proving that his voice was as relevant as ever. Yet the industry, often focused on youth and trend, was not built to sustain a new career for someone in his 80s. Though his national spotlight faded, he remained a beloved elder in gospel circles. Today, Elder Goldwire McClendon is remembered as a symbol of perseverance and faithfulness. He may not have had decades of recording success, but in just a short burst of recognition, he touched lives worldwide, proving that it's never too late for God to open doors and for one's gift to shine. Reverend Timothy Wright. Reverend Timothy Wright, affectionately called the godfather of gospel in the 1990s and early 2000s, embodied the role of pastor, songwriter, choir director, and singer all at once. Born in 1947 in Brooklyn, New York, Wright was steeped in church life from childhood, directing choirs before he was even a teenager. His energetic leadership style and booming voice made him one of the most dynamic figures in modern gospel. His standout hit, Come Thou Almighty King, became a fixture in church choirs nationwide and cemented his reputation as a pillar of traditional gospel sound. Wright was known for building massive choirs that filled sanctuaries with thunderous praise. Unlike performers chasing commercial crossover, he remained rooted in old-school gospel, deeply worshipful, scripturally grounded, and meant for the church first. Over his career, he recorded more than a dozen albums, collaborated with legends like Richard Smallwood and Hezekiah Walker, and earned Grammy and Stellar Award nominations. His concerts felt less like entertainment and more like revival. Can you imagine leading worship so powerfully that an entire choir and congregation move as one? That was Reverend Wright's signature gift. But tragedy struck in July 2008. On the way home from a church event in Pennsylvania, a wrong-way driver collided head-on with Wright's car. His wife, Betty, and their 14-year-old grandson were killed instantly. Reverend Wright survived but was critically injured. For months, the gospel community prayed for his recovery, but his health never fully returned. In April 2009, less than a year after the crash, he passed away at the age of 61. Though his life was cut short, Reverend Timothy Wright left a towering legacy. His songs remain staples in church choirs, and his ministry touched thousands through both word and music. His story is both triumphant and heartbreaking, reminding us that gospel legends are not only voices of praise, but also people who endure life's deepest trials with unshakable faith. Orlando Draper. Orlando Draper, born in 1963 in Alabama and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, was one of the most innovative choir directors gospel music has ever seen. By the late 1980s, he had already formed his famous choir, Orlando Draper and the Associates, a group that would redefine modern choir sound with energy, precision, and unmatched harmonies. His signature hit, My Soul Doth Magnify the Lord, became a joyful, high-energy anthem that spread quickly through churches and gospel radio. What set Draper apart was his dynamic stage presence he directed with both power and flair, often dancing and leaping as the choir responded with thunderous sound. By the 1990s, Draper and the Associates were touring internationally, performing alongside gospel icons like Shirley Caesar, Kirk Franklin, and Yolanda Adams. They even performed at the White House for President Bill Clinton, a moment that symbolized how far gospel had come into national recognition. In 1999, his album Reflections won a Grammy Award for Best Gospel Choir or Chorus Album. For a man in his mid-30s, it looked like the sky was the limit. Have you ever seen an artist whose energy made you believe they were destined to change an entire genre? That was Yolanda Draper's presence. But in the same year he reached this peak, tragedy struck. Draper was diagnosed with kidney failure, and his health declined rapidly. Later in 1998, just 34 years old, he passed away, leaving the gospel world in shock. His sudden death cut short what many believed would be decades of influence. Even so, Draper's fingerprints remain on gospel music. His innovative choir arrangements influenced a new generation of directors, including Donald Lawrence and Hezekiah Walker. To this day, choirs still perform "My Soul Doth Magnify the Lord" with the same energy he brought to it, ensuring that his legacy lives on far beyond his short life. LaShun Pace. LaShun Pace, born in 1961 in Atlanta, Georgia, emerged from the celebrated family ensemble, the Anointed Pace Sisters. But it was her solo voice that captured hearts across America. Known for her powerhouse delivery and emotional depth, she made her mark in the early 1990s with her breakout single, "I Know I've Been Changed." Released on her debut solo album, He Lives 1990. The song became an instant classic sung in churches nationwide and praised for its raw, soul-stirring conviction. When Pace sang, it wasn't performance, it was testimony. Her voice could rise from a whisper to a thunderous declaration within seconds, sending chills down the spine of anyone listening. Many remember moments when congregations erupted into shouts and tears as she delivered her signature song. Have you ever experienced a voice so powerful it felt like it carried both pain and victory at the same time? That was LaShun Pace. While she continued recording albums throughout the 1990s and 2000s, none matched the mainstream success of "I Know I've Been Changed." Still within gospel circles, she remained deeply respected. Her discography includes Shekinah Glory and It's My Time, records that showcased her unwavering devotion to traditional gospel. Beyond her music, LaShun Pace's personal journey was filled with trials. She battled health issues and endured heartbreaking loss, including the death of her teenage daughter, Xenia. Yet even through grief and illness, she held firmly to her faith, continuing to sing whenever she could. In 2007, she was inducted into the Christian Music Hall of Fame, a recognition of her lasting impact. LaShun Pace passed away in March 2022 at the age of 60, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and worship. Though she never sought celebrity status, her voice remains immortal in church choirs and recordings. LaShun Pace's story is one of triumph through pain, a reminder that gospel at its best is born from lived experience. Reverend James Moore. Reverend James Moore was one of those rare voices that could stop an entire congregation in its tracks. Born in 1956 in Detroit, Michigan, Moore grew up surrounded by the vibrant sounds of church choirs and quickly became known as a prodigy with a voice that blended preacher-like fire with soulful depth. His most iconic moment came in the late 1980s when he recorded "It Ain't Over Till God Says It's Over" with the Mississippi Mass Choir. The live performance became one of the most electrifying in gospel history, Moore shouting, crying, and pouring every ounce of his being into each note. The song spoke directly to those enduring hardship, reminding listeners that no diagnosis, no financial struggle, and no personal failure had the final word, only God did. Audiences testified that hearing Moore was like receiving a sermon wrapped in music. Have you ever listened to a performance that felt less like entertainment and more like divine reassurance? That was James Moore's power. For a time, he was a rising star, releasing albums such as Live at Jackson State University and Family and Friends, and he won multiple Stellar Awards for his contributions. However, behind the scenes, Moore faced a devastating battle with diabetes. The disease led to blindness and other severe health complications, limiting his ability to tour and record. As his health declined through the 1990s, his once promising national presence began to fade. Reverend James Moore passed away in 2000 at only 44 years old, far too young for a man with his level of talent and ministry. Yet even in death, his voice continues to inspire. "It Ain't Over" remains a staple in church services, reminding believers of endurance and faith. Moore's life is both a triumph and a tragedy, proof that a single song delivered with sincerity can leave an eternal impact. Margaret Allison. Margaret Allison was the powerhouse leader of the Angelic Gospel Singers, one of the first all-female gospel groups to gain national recognition. Born in 1921 in McCormick, South Carolina, she moved to Philadelphia, and in 1944 formed the quartet with her sister Josephine and friends Lucille Sherd and Ella Mae Norris. Just 3 years later, in 1947, they recorded their defining hit, "Touch Me, Lord Jesus." The song's tender yet commanding message spread quickly across black churches and made the group a household name in gospel circles. At a time when women struggled to find space in the industry, the Angelic Gospel Singers broke barriers. They toured nationally, performed on the radio, and became pioneers for future generations of female gospel artists. Margaret's voice stood out smooth, yet powerful, humble, yet commanding. Listeners often said her delivery felt like both a plea and a promise, creating an intimate connection with audiences. Would you agree that sometimes simplicity in a song carries more power than vocal fireworks? That was the magic of Allison's leadership. Although "Touch Me, Lord Jesus" remained their most enduring song, the group's influence stretched over 6 decades. They recorded numerous albums and continued to perform long after many of their contemporaries had retired. Yet despite their longevity, they never chased mainstream fame. They stayed close to their church roots, prioritizing ministry over commercial success. Margaret Allison remained with the Angelic Gospel Singers until her passing in 2008 at the age of 87, leaving behind a legacy of perseverance and faith-driven artistry. Even today, choirs still sing "Touch Me, Lord Jesus," keeping her voice alive. Allison's story is one of quiet but profound impact, a reminder that gospel's true power lies not in stardom, but in steadfast service to God and community. Dorothy Norwood. Dorothy Norwood, born in 1935 in Atlanta, Georgia, earned the title the world's greatest storyteller in gospel because of her unique ability to transform songs into vivid emotional narratives. She began her career as a teenager touring with the legendary Mahalia Jackson, later joining the Caravans, one of gospel's most influential groups. With her warm contralto voice and gift for weaving testimony into music, Norwood eventually launched a solo career that brought her national attention in the 1990s. Her standout hit, based on gospel singer Denise Williams's life story, showcased her talent for mixing spoken word testimony with powerful singing, a style that set her apart from her peers. Unlike traditional gospel performers who focused solely on vocal delivery, Norwood painted pictures with her music. She would pause mid-song to speak directly to the audience, creating drama and pulling listeners deeper into the story before returning to the soaring chorus. This innovative approach earned her comparisons to a preacher and a dramatist rolled into one. Have you ever been so caught up in a song story that you forgot you were listening to music? That was the hallmark of Dorothy Norwood's artistry. Throughout her career, she recorded more than 50 albums, collaborated with choirs across the nation, and became a fixture at revivals and conventions. Her songs tackled everyday struggles, heartbreak, faith, perseverance, making her relatable to ordinary churchgoers. Though she achieved her greatest commercial success in the 1990s, she had already spent decades building her reputation within the gospel community. Despite fading from mainstream gospel charts as newer contemporary styles emerged, Norwood never stopped performing or ministering through music. Even in her later years, she continued releasing albums and appeared at church events, her storytelling style still captivating audiences. Dorothy Norwood's journey shows that gospel is not just about melody, it's about message. Her ability to make scripture and testimony feel alive secured her place as a living legend of gospel storytelling. Cleophas Robinson. Cleophas Robinson, born in 1932 in Canton, Mississippi, was known as the Singing Pastor, a title that reflected his rare ability to blend preaching and music into one powerful ministry. He began singing as a teenager, but it was his charismatic pulpit style that gave his performances a unique edge. His most famous recording, Wrapped Up, Tied Up, Tangled Up, 1960s, became a beloved gospel classic, capturing the joy of being completely immersed in God's love. Robinson's delivery was smooth yet commanding. He had a voice that could soar with passion or settle into a deep, comforting resonance, always carrying the authority of a preacher. In his concerts, audiences often felt they were attending both a sermon and a worship service. Would you agree that sometimes the most moving gospel moments happen when preaching and singing become one? For Robinson, that was the essence of his gift. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, he toured nationally, recorded numerous albums, and appeared frequently on gospel radio programs. Yet despite his popularity within the church circuit, he never crossed over into mainstream fame. Part of this was by choice. Robinson valued authenticity over commercial success. He refused to dilute his style to fit secular markets, insisting on keeping his music rooted in the sanctuary. In addition to singing, Robinson pastored churches and mentored younger ministers and musicians, ensuring his influence extended beyond his recordings. He became a respected figure in both the gospel music world and the pulpit, admired for his ability to connect with people on a spiritual level. Cleophas Robinson passed away in 1998, but his legacy endures in the countless choirs and soloists who still perform Wrapped Up, Tied Up, Tangled Up. His life demonstrated that gospel greatness is not measured by chart success, but by the souls reached and uplifted. Robinson remains a shining example of the preacher-singer tradition at its finest. The Barrett Sisters, Deloy, Billy, Rhodessa. The Barrett Sisters. Deloy, Billy, and Rhodessa became one of gospel's most beloved family trios, their harmonies so seamless that they sounded like a single voice flowing from three hearts. Raised in Chicago, the sisters grew up singing in church and refined their talent under the mentorship of gospel matriarchs like Mahalia Jackson and Thomas A. Dorsey. By the 1960s, they emerged as a national treasure, best known for their enduring classic, Jesus Will Work It Out. With Deloy leading as the powerful soprano Billy's contralto warmth and Rhodessa's alto grounding, the blend their music carried both technical brilliance and deep spirituality. The Barrett sisters toured extensively, bringing their unique sound across the United States and even abroad. They performed in Europe, appeared in documentaries like Say Amen Somebody, 1982, and sang on national television, introducing gospel to audiences who had never stepped inside a black church. Their style was not about flash or theatrics. It was about faith, discipline, and the unshakable bond of family. Have you ever heard siblings sing so tightly together that you couldn't tell where one voice ended and the other began? That was the Barrett sisters' magic. Although Jesus Will Work It Out remained their best-known hit, they recorded numerous albums across decades, each showcasing their commitment to traditional gospel, even as the genre evolved. Unlike other groups that leaned into contemporary styles, the Barrett sisters remained rooted in the church, prioritizing ministry over commercial appeal. By the late 1970s, their mainstream visibility waned, yet within gospel circles, they continued to command immense respect. Deloy Barrett Campbell, the eldest and leader, passed away in 2011, followed by Billy in 2020. Rhodessa continues to carry their legacy, keeping alive the spirit of sisterly harmony. Together, they left behind not just recordings, but a model of excellence for women in gospel music. The Barrett sisters proved that with faith and family, a song can echo for generations. Reverend Milton Brunson. Reverend Milton Brunson was more than a choir director. He was a visionary who transformed community singing into a national gospel phenomenon. Born in 1929 in Chicago, Brunson founded the Thompson Community Singers, known simply as the Tommies, in 1948, while still a teenager. Over the next 5 decades, the Tommies became one of the most celebrated gospel choirs in America. Their defining anthem, "Available to You 1988, remains a cornerstone of choir repertoires everywhere. Its message of surrendering one's life to God resonating deeply with congregations. What set Brunson apart was his belief that ordinary people could create extraordinary music. The Tommies were made up not of stars, but of church members, neighbors, and students. Yet under his leadership, their sound rivaled the finest professional ensembles. Their harmonies were tight, their energy contagious, and their worship authentic. Can you imagine standing in a choir where every voice around you feels like a river of praise pouring into one unstoppable current? That was the Brunson experience. Throughout their career, the Tommies recorded more than 20 albums, earning Grammy and Stellar awards, and collaborating with legends like Albertina Walker and Shirley Caesar. Their concerts often felt like revival services, drawing thousands eager to witness the fusion of community and worship. Tragically, Reverend Brunson's life ended in 1997 at just 68 years old. His passing left a deep void in gospel music, and though the Tommies continued performing, their prominence gradually faded without his guiding presence. Still available to you, and other classics such as Safe in His Arms remain staples in church choirs today. Reverend Milton Brunson's legacy is one of empowerment, proving that when faith meets community, extraordinary art is born. He gave countless singers their first stage-nurtured talent and reminded the world that gospel is not just music, but ministry through harmony. His influence lives on in every choir that lifts up Available to You. The Truthettes. The Truthettes were a spirited all-female gospel group that brought a new energy and boldness to the genre during the 1980s. Hailing from Mississippi, they were known for their youthful presence, sassy delivery, and willingness to push the boundaries of traditional gospel while still staying true to its message. Their breakout hit, Peeping in the Window, was more than just a catchy tune. It was a witty commentary on gossip judgment and the tendency of church folks to meddle in others' business. The track blended humor, storytelling, and spiritual truth, making it one of the most memorable gospel songs of its era. Unlike many polished, highly structured choirs, the Truthettes brought raw authenticity. Their harmonies were soulful but playful, and their stage presence radiated confidence. Audiences loved how their music reflected real-life church culture with a wink and a nod. Have you ever heard a gospel song that made you laugh, nod in recognition, and feel convicted all at once? That was the genius of the Truthettes. Their success was short-lived in terms of mainstream gospel charts, as the late 1980s and early 1990s ushered in more urban contemporary styles. Still, the Truthettes maintained a loyal following within traditional gospel circles. They continued recording and performing for several years, but none of their later work matched the cultural impact of Peeping in the Window. Despite fading from the national spotlight, the group's contribution was significant. They proved that gospel could carry serious messages through humor and relatability, paving the way for artists who wanted to address everyday struggles with honesty. Even now, their music is remembered fondly by those who experienced their boldness firsthand. The Truthettes may not have dominated charts for decades, but their mark on gospel remains joyful, daring, and true. Keith Wonderboy Johnson. Keith Wonderboy Johnson. Born in Brooklyn, New York in 1972, earned his nickname as a child because his voice was so extraordinary that church audiences marveled, calling him a Wonder Boy. From that point forward, gospel was his destiny. In the 1990s and 2000s, Johnson became one of the few artists able to bridge the gap between traditional quartet-style gospel and modern sounds, appealing to both older listeners and younger fans. His signature hit, I Made It 2000, was a joyous declaration of survival and faith, and it quickly became a gospel radio favorite nationwide. Johnson's style was marked by an infectious energy. Backed by his group, the Spiritual Voices, he infused quartet traditions, tight harmonies, driving rhythms, and call and response patterns with a fresh contemporary flair. He performed on major gospel stages, toured extensively, and even earned stellar award nominations. His ability to connect with audiences through both testimony and groove made him one of the most beloved gospel artists of his generation. Would you agree that sometimes the most powerful gospel songs are the ones that make you clap your hands and cry tears of joy at the same time? That was the effect of Keith "Wonderboy" Johnson's music. Although he recorded dozens of albums and remained active in the quartet community, none of his later releases reached the crossover success of "I Made It." Still, he maintained a strong following, especially among those devoted to traditional gospel styles. Tragically, Johnson passed away in September 2022 at the age of 50, leaving the gospel world stunned. His sudden loss cut short a career that still had much to offer, but his legacy remains secure. Songs like "I Made It" continue to inspire believers, reminding them that survival itself is a testimony. Keith "Wonderboy" Johnson will always be remembered as the boy wonder who grew into a gospel man of resilience, joy, and faith. Evelyn Turrentine Agee. Evelyn Turrentine Agee, often celebrated as the Queen of Gospel Energy, was born in 1943 in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up singing in church from an early age. For years, she served faithfully in local ministries before achieving national recognition in the early 2000s with her breakout hit, "God Did It." Released in 2001, the song became a fiery anthem of gratitude, testifying that every blessing and every breakthrough comes from God's hand. Its straightforward message paired with Evelyn's commanding voice made it an instant classic. It climbed gospel charts, spread quickly by word of mouth, and became a staple at choir anniversaries and Sunday services across the country. What made Evelyn stand out was her ability to fuse testimony with performance. She didn't just sing "God Did It," she lived it, delivering the song with such conviction that listeners felt her personal testimony in every note. Choirs across America adopted it, turning it into a congregational standard. Have you ever heard a song so full of testimony that it felt like the singer was telling your own story too? That was Evelyn Turrentine Agee's gift. Despite the success, Evelyn never pursued the trappings of mainstream celebrity. She didn't flood the market with albums or constantly chase radio airplay. Instead, she focused on using music as ministry, performing at church events, women's conferences, and revivals, rather than commercial tours. She released additional projects like "In God's Own Time" and "Work With Me, Jesus," but none surpassed the cultural weight of her signature hit. Evelyn's career illustrates the paradox of gospel fame. One song can carry an artist into history even if their broader catalog remains underappreciated. Today, "God Did." It continues to be sung by choirs and soloists alike, keeping her influence alive. Evelyn Turrentine Agee may not have spent years in the national spotlight, but her impact proved that one spirit-filled anthem can ripple through generations. Dottie Peoples. Dottie Peoples, born in 1950 in Dayton, Ohio, became one of gospel's most distinctive female voices, often referred to as the songbird of the South. Before turning to gospel full-time, she briefly pursued jazz and R&B, but her true calling revealed itself in the 1990s when she delivered her defining hit, "On Time God." Released in 1994 on her live album, "On Time God," the track exploded in popularity, resonating with believers across denominations. Its unforgettable refrain, "He may not come when you want him, but he'll be there, right on time," became a saying in churches, barbershops, and living rooms alike. People's vocal style is fiery and commanding, often compared to a sermon set to melody. She blends traditional gospel roots with contemporary arrangements, creating music that both honors the past and excites the present. Her stage presence is equally magnetic, bold, confident, and overflowing with joy. Have you ever experienced a live performance where the singer's energy lifted the entire room until everyone was clapping, shouting, and standing on their feet? That was the hallmark of a Dottie Peoples concert. Her career soared during the mid-1990s, earning stellar awards and Grammy nominations. Songs like Testify and God Can further cemented her reputation. But on time, God remained the cornerstone of her legacy. Even decades later, it is still performed by choirs and soloists, proving its timeless power. While she never crossed into mainstream pop culture the way some gospel peers did, Peoples maintained a steady presence in the gospel industry, touring widely and ministering through music. She became especially known for performing at women's conferences, where her empowering delivery uplifted audiences. Dottie Peoples continues to perform into the 21st century, reminding fans that gospel is not just a genre, but a lifestyle. Though her later works didn't surpass the phenomenal success of On Time God, that one song secured her place among gospel greats. Her legacy is living proof that a single anthem, when rooted in faith, can outlive trends and touch eternity. Helen Baylor. Helen Baylor's journey is one of the most remarkable testimonies in gospel music, a story of talent, struggle, redemption, and unshakable faith. Born in 1954 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Baylor began performing professionally as a teenager. By the 1970s, she was singing R&B, even sharing stages with giants like Stevie Wonder, Chaka Khan, and Aretha Franklin. On the outside, she was living the dream. But behind the curtain, she was spiraling into addiction, battling cocaine abuse, broken relationships, and the emptiness of fame. Her turning point came in the late 1980s when she fully surrendered her life to Christ. This rebirth launched a new chapter, one that would define her legacy not in secular music, but in gospel. In 1990, she released her breakthrough album Highly Recommended, which included the powerful anthem, Sold Out. The song was raw testimony, a declaration that she was fully committed to God and had left behind the destructive lifestyle that once held her captive. Delivered with her rich, soulful contralto, the track resonated deeply with listeners who saw themselves in her story. Have you ever heard a song where you could feel the singer's entire life poured into every word that was sold out? The song became her signature hit, winning Dove Awards and opening doors for her to minister worldwide. Baylor was invited to perform at churches' conferences and recovery programs where her transparency about her struggles gave hope to countless people. She recorded additional albums like The Live Experience and Love Brought Me Back, but none surpassed the cultural impact of Sold Out. Though her mainstream gospel career slowed in the 2000s, Baylor remained a powerful presence in ministry. She published her autobiography, No Greater Love, and continued to share her testimony through both music and speaking engagements. Helen Baylor's legacy rests not just on her vocal talent, but on her willingness to be vulnerable. She showed that gospel is not about perfection, but about transformation. While she may be remembered primarily for one iconic anthem, her story continues to inspire those who believe that no one is beyond redemption when grace steps in. Some say these gospel legends were forgotten because they refused to compromise their faith, while others believe they simply came too early for the industry to recognize their genius. But whether it was Lucy Campbell's hymns, Inez Andrews' mountain-moving prayer, or Keith Wonderboy Johnson's modern quartet Fire, each left behind a song that still shakes the soul today. So here's the real question: do you think one unforgettable song is enough to define a legacy, or does true greatness demand a lifetime of hits? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more stories like this.